Spurs va faire lever peut-être Marcel Cerdan. Le double pump en châssis une fois. Wembanyama! Aïe, 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 aïe!
Michael Jordan waited until the draft lottery to decide whether to sell the Charlotte franchise. And the reason is none other than the arrival of the best prospect in the history of any sport. That's what some analysts and scouts have said about the 19-year-old center who has all basketball lovers worldwide on the edge of their seats. It's strange because on the very day of the draft lottery, Victor Wembanyama already knows which jersey would be on his back. Well, not with 100% certainty, but with 99.9% certainty. And the fact is that May 16th was a day circled in red for many NBA franchises. No, it's not because LeBron's Los Angeles Lakers were playing that night against the Denver Nuggets in the first game of the Western Conference Finals. It was because the NBA draft lottery would be held just before the game. The Detroit Pistons, Houston Rockets, and San Antonio Spurs were the teams most likely to hit the jackpot at 14%. And the ultimate prize was none other than Victor Wembanyama. The young Frenchman has been a worldwide sensation since the age of 17, and the hype for Victor has been built up even more this year with all the media blitz around the French team. But what makes Victor such a special player? Are you still asking yourself that question? There's nothing on the basketball court that Wembanyama cannot do. In addition to having unique physical attributes at 7'4" tall with an 8-foot wingspan, Victor possesses a deep bag of moves and skills worthy of a veteran NBA superstar. He's simply the complete player. Ball handling, long shooting range, good defensive skills. It's hard to find any flaws in his game. And we already know that the media loves that. Wembanyama's become a basketball demigod that many fans believe in blindly. And this is not new. Many players have gone through a similar process in their formative years, and their college or overseas game does not always translate to the demands of the NBA. In fact, being drafted first does not guarantee you success, but sometimes is an added pressure that many can't stand. But there's something different about Victor. Almost every prospect has an aspect of their game that they need to work on. But in Wemby's case, the only question is whether his light frame can endure the grueling physicalness of the NBA. Without having a hype meter on hand, we can't say for sure that Wembanyama is more hyped than players like Andrew Wiggins or Zion Williamson, but you gotta admit that he's giving off LeBron prospect vibes. Remember how a young LeBron's high school game was the first nationally televised high school game in 2003? Well, this season Wemby's French games were shown on NBA League Pass, an unheard of situation for an overseas prospect. And even King James has joined in the hype himself.
He's for sure a generational talent.
So yes, on May 16th, the Spurs won the lottery, and it's the best one in nearly 20 years. Because in a year where the first overall pick is more important than ever, the Spurs' 14% made it count. So barring any surprises, we'll see the 7'4" center under Gregg Popovich. And this is the best thing that could have happened to both the player and the franchise. In a twist of fate that only the basketball gods could have imagined, the 2023 NBA draft marks the first time that the Spurs will have taken the first choice since 1997, when they selected the great Tim Duncan out of Wake Forest. And we know that Coach Pop knows what to do with generational big men. 5-time NBA champion, 3 times Finals MVP, 2-time MVP, 15-time All-Star, 10-time All-NBA first team, 8-time defensive first team. These are the accolades of Tim Duncan, considered by many as the best power forward in the history of the league. Pop completely transformed a losing franchise into one of the most respected in the league through Tim Duncan. But the most incredible part of Popovich's exploits is his consistency. San Antonio managed at least 50 wins for 18 straight seasons. Yeah, you heard that right. 18 straight seasons. This consistency, coupled with the ability to win 5 separate rings in 15 years, elevated Popovich's status to the godfather of coaches. One of Pop's greatest strengths is player development. A great list of talents such as Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, Patty Mills, DeJounte Murray, Derek White, and more recently Keldon Johnson, we could go on adding names to the list for an hour, have developed their talent under this coach. And not just at a skill development level. For example, Kawhi Leonard went from this in his rookie season in San Antonio to this in the 2016-2017 season.
Find the open man. Leonard raises up. Nothing with the ball. Deuce. Or just come off and shoot it. Harden. Blocked by Leonard.
A total transformation of game and mind. Two completely different players. Who knows what the career of Kawhi Leonard, originally just a defensive specialist, would have been like if he had not been drafted by San Antonio. The same could apply to Tony Parker or Manu Ginobili. Few coaches are capable of taking so many players to superstar status in the NBA. But what is it about Popovich that makes him different from other coaches? Well, besides 5 rings, the main key is the way he understands basketball. Pop is an old-school coach who's adapted to modern times, and that is shown through his career with the Spurs, establishing some very characteristic philosophies based on ball movement and the extra pass concept as emblems. In addition, time has shown how players who succeed in Popovich's system have to have some very special requirements: adaptability, great basketball IQ, and a willingness to learn. Any player who meets those 3 elements has a high chance of succeeding in San Antonio's system. And in Victor's case, he has all 3, in addition to being a generational talent. Wembanyama has already talked about how he would love to be part of that project. But surely there must be another aspect that's convinced Wemby about wanting to play for the Spurs over, say, the Rockets. Is the fact of Gregg Popovich's long history of success with French-born players. And that's because 2 key players in the Spurs' success during the last few years of their NBA reign were Tony Parker and Boris Diaw. Both were players who did not have the greatest athleticism, but they had a basketball IQ above most of the NBA. And when your compatriots have been treated well in a city in a foreign country, you can rest easy. There's a special relationship between France and the Spurs because of Tony, of course, and also Boris, Wembanyama said on Tuesday. I know half of the country, maybe if not the whole country, wanted the Spurs to have the first pick. So I was looking at everyone and everyone was happy, so I was too. In short, the connection couldn't be greater. Besides, Popovich is a great lover of French culture, or at least of French wine. No, seriously now, did Wembanyama want to play for the Spurs or just go to Spurs team dinners? At this point, we already know what Victor can offer for the San Antonio franchise, but what can the Spurs offer Victor? Honestly, the roster's not at its best. After finishing the season with a 22-60 record, the Spurs are still far from having a roster to compete in the playoffs. However, the careful management of the team in recent seasons has allowed them to accumulate a large amount of assets, including 30 draft picks for the next 6 seasons. In addition, the salary structure of the roster allows a lot of flexibility for the future, including possible big signings in free agency and very favorable contracts, such as the one signed by Keldon Johnson. Keldon signed a rare NBA contract in which his salary decreases each year instead of increasing, allowing the player to have more money sooner and the team more flexibility in the future. Very smart. In addition to Johnson, the Spurs have other quality young players such as Trey Jones, Jeremy Sohan, and Devin Vassell. San Antonio's in a moment that gives them a lot of flexibility and freedom to build. In fact, it's probably the most fun part of rebuilding, and more so if you can pick up a surefire franchise cornerstone. These years are vital in a rebuild, and the coach leading the pack is very important. Spurs fans, though, can breathe easy as Popovich is still at the helm and has remained throughout the rebuild. However, rumors of retirement does surround the legendary San Antonio coach, who also plays an important role for Team USA. Still, the fact that he's at the head coach spot seems to indicate that he'll be at the helm for a while longer, and we'll get to see how the Aliens' career under Coach Pop will begin. Undoubtedly one of the most promising projects in the NBA, fate has aligned the planet so that the career of one of the greatest young prodigies in the history of the sport begins in style, in one of the most iconic scenarios of the league. We can't wait to see how Pop does with another generational talent in Victor Wembanyama, but it's still fun to think, what would happen if the Spurs didn't pick him?